Good evening from Nashville. I'm Alan Jackson. So with all the focus on Russia and President Trump, have we heard anything that represents any truthful such connection back in 2016? Of course not, because it was all made up, first to try to protect Hillary Clinton, and second to make Trump's time in office as miserable as possible. So the truth is finally coming out. And every week we learn more about how former President Obama, Hillary Clinton, Brennan, Comey, and McCabe engineered a Russia collusion hoax. And we learn about how the legacy media propelled a dishonest narrative, all to attack President Trump. It was a full-scale, deeply secret attempt aimed at convincing the American people that then candidate Trump was essentially a Russian agent. The legacy media was all over it when the lies were being pushed, but now that it's been exposed as anything but honest, they're hiding. Well, the reason is that if they covered the revelations now, they would be publicly confessing that they were an essential part of spreading the big lies back then. But they don't control the airwaves anymore, because truth in reporting does exist, and that's how Breitbart News works, led by Editor-in-Chief Alex Marlow, who joins us again tonight. Welcome back, Alex.
Pastor, always nice to see you. Thanks again.
You know, every week it seems this story gets bigger. It's not just Obama, Brennan, Comey, and McCabe, but we've now seen evidence that Hillary Clinton was directly involved. Her idea was to put out something on then candidate Trump to take the media's eyes off her email scandal. I'm beginning to think that we're still at the beginning of this web of deceit, and it came from the very top, didn't it, Alex?
Yeah, I don't think I'd been with Andrew Breitbart for 5 minutes when he introduced me to Saul Alinsky, the radical left-wing activist who was clearly deeply influential on Barack Obama and his whole ecosystem. But one of his rules was that you accuse your opponents of doing what your worst flaw is. It's an extreme version of projection where you see where is your biggest vulnerability and let's push that onto your opponent because it neutralizes their attacks on you because it confuses the public. And it's a very clever and effective tactic. And that's exactly what Hillary Clinton did here. My friend and colleague, Peter Schweitzer, his reporting for his book, Clinton Cash, almost a decade ago, made it clear that the Clintons were very soft on Russia. They had done enormous amounts of business with Russia. Russian oligarchs had funded, I think, to the tune of 9 figures, the Clinton Foundation. Bill Clinton had been paid $500,000 to give a 45-minute speech in Russia at one time. They had also, the Clinton State Department had allowed through this organization, CFIUS, to approve, I think it was 20% of America's uranium reserves to get sold to a Russian company. All this is insane, and it makes the Clintons look very terrible on the issue. So what do? They take that vulnerability and they say, no, it's not me who's soft on Russia, it's Trump. Even though Trump had no ties to them whatsoever, and in fact, looking at his first term, he was very tough on Russia. I can go through all those details as well. But that's what this was. This is classic projection, and absolutely Hillary Clinton is the queen of it.
You know, I suppose it's not surprising that the legacy media is hiding from the news to try to protect their own reputations. But listen to this spin from an NBC reporter.
This is looking into something for which there is no evidence to back it up. And it's really, it seems, a politically motivated move to keep the focus on one of the president's clear political foes.
Alex, what will it take for the country as a whole to get a real understanding of how big a deal this is?
Yeah, so first of all, we need to connect dots, we in the commentariat, we in the media class. We need to explain how so many of the problems that affect this country were either revealed by or enhanced by the Russian collusion narrative. You were kind enough to interview me about my book, Breaking the Law, last time. One of the key cases, the Stormy Daniels case, the only case that ended up in criminal convictions against Donald Trump, I argue it was a horribly reasoned case legally, and it was only a conviction because of a judge and jury who were already in the bag for the left. But the case wouldn't have even started if not for the Russian collusion hoax. One of the key elements of the prosecution against Trump was documents, testimony from Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer and fixer, who only got wrapped up into this spider web because the Department of Justice was able to get access to his Gmail account because of what? The fake, phony hoax, Russia collusion hoax. That's it. That's how they got turned on to Cohen as a key witness. And if not for that, there wouldn't have been that criminal conviction against Trump. So all of it is connected in a really broad and frankly scary way.
Well, for anyone wondering how the media could keep quiet about something this consequential, Consider how President Biden's team said the border was secure, even as 12 to 20 million people walked into our country. And the legacy media outlets, they simply looked the other way as it was happening. Well, Alex, can they continue to get away with picking and choosing what's news and what's not?
I think that the media's credibility has been completely neutralized, and I think it's thanks to outlets like yours, I think outlets like mine, the fact that individual influencers are so powerful on the social media space, it all helps. But the media's done this to themselves. They were on the wrong side of every major story this century, as far as I could tell. They got Trump wrong, they got the Russia collusion hoax wrong. The list just goes on and on. They've got the lawfare scandal wrong. And they got Joe Biden wrong in so many ways. The list just goes on and on of the major scandals that they've missed and the ones that they've exaggerated that turned out to be nothing burgers. So their credibility's in the tank. Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, admitted this in an op-ed last year. The guy who owns the Washington Post said journalists are the least trusted profession in the country. That's glorious. We should all celebrate this, but we still need to get the news from somewhere, so it's up to the rest of us to step up.
Well, Alex, your new book, Breaking the Law, it's a good read, but it goes deep into the weaponization of our legal system. Do we have any idea yet what laws were broken by Brennan, Comey, McCabe, or even former President Obama or Hillary Clinton? Or are we still in the fact-finding phase?
I think we're in the fact-finding phase, but I'm still encouraged by the investigations because we let this skate the first time around. We should have been investigating this earlier, and now we finally seem to be taking it seriously. And there's a lot more places where we can go to investigate. Take, for example, with my area of focus, which has been the lawfare against President Trump. We're now looking to Jack Smith for potential Hatch Act violations, which means politicizing an office that shouldn't be political. That's great, but I got another half a dozen names minimum of people who should be treated similarly. And hopefully people who read the book who are in the position of power recognize that and they start investigating. But some of these things take time. Think about your favorite, true crime podcast you might listen to. It might take 4 years to figure out who's committed a murder and hold people accountable. I'm okay with that. I just want the public engaged and focused, and our lawmakers determined to actually get answers and to restore one system of justice for this country. We want equal justice under the law. That has not been applied to people like Donald Trump and his supporters, and has also not been applied on the flip side to the Comeys, Clappers, and Brennans, who probably were committing illegal acts and instead ended up with lucrative TV and book deals.
Well, Alex, we'd like you to stay for another segment as we take a short break. Please feel free to jump in on our conversation. You can send me an email to ajnow.com. You'll see the link in the upper right from your phone or your laptop. Your feedback, it contributes to how we plan our next shows. We'll be right back. I'd like to extend a personal invitation to join us for our Culture and Christianity Conference. It's September the 19th and 20th on our campus here at World Outreach Church, just outside of Nashville. We've chosen 3 specific topics to explore with a wonderful group of guests. We're going to talk about the church and our expected impact in this culture, the media and their impact in our culture, and then finally, our health, how we can be healthy in the midst of all these competing voices we're hearing. The real goal is how we take our faith and integrate it in our world so we have better lives, stronger families, and strengthen our nation. Join us for Culture and Christianity here in Murfreesboro. We're back now with the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and the host of the Alex Marlow podcast. Well, here's a sign of the times we're living in. Based on the harassment conservatives get when they have to do business within the very liberal confines of Washington, D.C., there are a number of private restaurants that have opened up so that people doing business with the Trump team can have a safe place to get some work done without being harassed. Do you agree with the no apparent agenda progressives are using noise and video stunts just to get attention?
So I like that anyone who wants to get attention, it's the way things are. But I think that the harassment, it turns into violence and it turns into things that I think are deeply inappropriate. We saw this with the first Trump administration, where people like Stephen Miller, couldn't go out to eat without having being harassed by left-wing activists. I know personally, when I was in D.C. at the time, I started making reservations under a fake name because of my being editor of Breitbart, and it's kind of sad that it feels like that's necessary, that you don't want to warn people that, hey, I'm coming to eat at your establishment, because you don't know who's going to leak that information to someone and try to create some viral moment online. Personally, my information about where I live was put online by an Antifa Facebook group, and we'd alert law enforcement for that. So all of this is a culture that does spiral into things that are deeply inappropriate, because we've lost such trust in each other, and we're so divided in so many ways, and it's up to us to try to restore that somehow.
Well, I'm sure you've noticed that you could have some competition at Barnes & Noble's now that Kamala Harris has put out a book about her campaign. And it now sounds like she's getting out of politics. Well, you live out west. Is there any buzz about what she might try to do next?
I don't know. There was a moment where she was the clear frontrunner for 2028 for a Democrat nomination. I always thought that was still far-fetched because she's so unimpressive. And I still feel like her 107-day campaign wasn't long enough for people to understand how bad of a candidate she was. I think she only would have done worse the longer she would have campaigned. I know this because I followed her career out here in California. She said she's not going to run for governor of California. I think she should have. I think it would have been a good move. California is still left enough where, even with all of the great momentum we have in the conservative movement, it's almost guaranteed to get a Democrat governor again. And that would have been a nice consolation prize for her, because if she runs for president, she very well might lose because she's such a terrible candidate. Recall, she ran for 10 months in 2020. And she raised more money than any other candidate. She didn't get a single delegate. It was pathetic race. She dropped out way before Iowa. It was a total disgrace for her. So she's a terrible national candidate. So I really don't know what she's going to do. I mean, she's older than she looks. Maybe she'll go the Netflix route or something, but she's a deeply unimpressive person. And I don't say that about every Democrat. I say that about her.
Well, let's move to New York for a question. The socialist mayoral candidate flew off to get married in Africa, where his parents have a home. He had a large security staff keeping people away from the event. It's interesting that this is the same guy who wants to defund the police in New York, and now he's rolling around Manhattan with lots of protection in a big black SUV. Do you think enough voters will see through his facade?
I don't, unfortunately. I feel like I've lived this out in California. It's been interesting to watch people act like the Zohran Mamdani phenomenon in New York is new. It's not new. We've been doing this experiment in California for 30 years, where we elect the dumbest, most far-left people, and then they get outflanked by even dumber, further left people. And even though the state gets worse, that things get more expensive, we run a deficit, crime goes up, illegal immigration ruins the schools and the healthcare system. And we say, well, let's just elect people who are a heightened version of the people that are doing it wrong. That's what we do in some enclaves of this country. It's very depressing, but it's a reality. And so people are looking at Zohran like he's a new phenomenon. He's not. And New York has been a mess and has been going in the wrong direction for a long time. It's gotten filthier. It's gotten less pleasant. And anything Eric Adams does to try to rein back in some of the crime seems to be unpopular with a lot of the voters. So I'm not surprised. And the left doesn't care about hypocrisy. Look at Bernie Sanders. He's got 3 houses. He's a millionaire. And, he's a socialist, too. So they're comfortable with the hypocrisy. And he'll probably win, and it's going to be crazy.
Well, Elizabeth Warren seems thrilled to have a socialist on her team. Listen to this endorsement.
The people I know and know well, like Mamdani, like Ocasio-Cortez, like Sanders, are all in there fighting, and they know what they're fighting for. They're fighting for an America that's not just controlled by a handful of billionaires.
Alex, she's been using those same talking points for years. Her party has dropped below 20% in favorability. You think she'll ever realize that the voters aren't buying it?
I don't know, because again, she's in one of these enclaves where, there's no Republicans in Massachusetts, so to speak. And so her constituency, the people who put her back in power every 6 years, love all this stuff. They're far left radicals, because in single party states, and I live in one, the furthest left portion of that party, the Democrat Party, really controls what goes on. And it's deeply depressing and probably foreign to audiences like yours, Pastor. But it really is, they love all the leftism. They love the socialism. They love the DEI still. They love the wokeness. And they really are hung up on some of these ideas that failed the Democrats on a national level for so long. So Warren is sort of nutty. Remember that she faked being a Native American, and she had this book called she was in a Native American cookbook called Pow Wow Chow, even though she wasn't a Native American. Her story is unbelievable. That she survived to this point, it politically still sort of boggles the mind because she's so disingenuous. But she's a very strange person, and anything she says is mostly to be mocked.
Well, I'd like to end on a positive note. The president's negotiated some big-time U.S. investment deals with Japan, the EU, several countries in the Mideast, and now a big investment from Tim Cook at Apple. Maybe there's a book on breaking the ceiling of success for you next year. What do you think?
I like it. I think it's really underrated how many accomplishments the president has made, and a lot of people who are hyper online in the conservative movement are trying to talk ourselves out of celebrating. But if you look at the fact that we're having net decrease in migration, which is just a historic accomplishment, we're cutting all these trade deals. We've announced peace deals, I think, in 6 or 7 regions around the world, with more, I think, yet to come. President Trump understands that to control the media narrative and to have a heightened legacy, an ideal legacy, he needs to have as many victories as possible as quickly as he can, and he's really racking them up. We tend to get bogged down if our favorite issue is in front burner, or if some judge, some of these judges are horrific, but they block a portion of the agenda. We should also stop and think about how much positivity has happened, and the alternative is so much worse.
Well, Alex, it's always a treat to have you on. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Pastor, my pleasure. I hope to talk to you soon.
His new book is called Breaking the Law. You can call up his podcast anytime, the Alex Marlow Podcast. I'll be back in a moment with more signs of hope and later your emails. Stay tuned. Hey, I want to give you a personal invitation to join my podcast, Culture and Christianity.
For a person to think that the Bible is not political, you don't know the Bible.
We're trying to understand how to take our faith outside the walls of the church and live it out in the marketplace.
He will show you what to do, whether it's in our communities, in our country, or other places in the world.
So I brought in some friends, some people that are trying to do this.
How could anyone call themselves Christian and be pro-choice? Is beyond my comprehension.
But I think he wanted them open and in need of him every day.
We have been living through a season of unprecedented deception, propaganda, manipulation.
Everybody says, Israel is attacking schools in the Gaza Strip.
I want to be a part of seeing culture and Christianity intersect. Hope you enjoy the podcast. We live in a time of unprecedented manipulation and deception. It's just our reality. Lawlessness is increasing. With each week, more disturbing discoveries are made regarding the secret attempts by very influential people in Washington, D.C. to try to convince the American people that Donald Trump was a Russian agent. And much of the legacy media is refusing to cover this. Well, the previous administration said our border was secure, and the legacy media happily passed along the narrative, which they knew to be false. Millions came through our open border. We're still facing the residual impact of that. We have sanctuary cities and sanctuary states that refuse to enforce federal laws while they demand federal dollars. It's absurd. If you ignore federal law, you shouldn't get a federal penny. Well, here in Tennessee, Belmont University was in the news because while the federal government said they wouldn't give federal funding to universities that promote institutionalized DEI training, Belmont officials were caught on video saying that they were going to rename DEI and then expand it within the university. You got to think about that a moment. A Christian university openly acknowledging they're going to practice deception and dishonesty and transgress federal regulations while they request federal dollars. School authority figures modeling for our students deception, dishonesty, and lawlessness. Well, a fundamental premise of Christianity is this notion of repentance. We don't just live through sin, ignoring it, try to forget it, put it in the distant past. We have to acknowledge we were wrong and make a change. It seems to me an attitude of repentance at our Christian universities from our leaders, maybe in our own homes, would make this a better place for all of us. We'll be right back with your emails. Thank you for spending a few minutes of your day with us. Just a reminder, you can go to ajnow.com. There's an archive of all the programs. It's easy to share a link with a friend. The more the merrier. Your emails are always a highlight. S. Browning from Texas emailed, I'm sure thankful for your daily news program. I'm glad to watch the news from a Christian perspective. It's a relief from the anti-everything Christian and conservative mainstream media. I have a suggestion on what to do with the tariff funds coming in. They should be invested in those companies that want to bring back or start manufacturing goods here in the USA. As much as I would enjoy some cash in hand, I'd rather know that my medicines and foods are made here. Well, that's a fascinating idea. I think made in America is going to become fashionable again, and we're going to get to watch that happen. Keep praying. Eileen in Memphis wrote, thank you for unapologetically sharing God's word in the midst of all the calamity in this world. That you feel the need to speak to churches as well as individuals feels like a beacon to the world, but it is sadly needed. Thank you again for standing in the gap, praying for your strength, grace, and wisdom. Well, Eileen, I think we have to remember God is moving in the earth. There is evidence all around us of the good things God is doing in the lives of people. I want to celebrate that and not get captivated by the negative. And finally, a viewer on the YouTube episode with Mark Morano, he said, I'm not against different types of energy. I'm against the lies that were being pushed about the cost, total materials, and energy used to make the units, and even the possible forced child labor on some of the materials. I think we would all be better off trying to conserve all types of energy. Honor what God gives us by using it wisely. Amen. You know, I think we have a biblical assignment, a mandate to be good stewards over our environment. But to be good stewards, we have to have the truth. And for too long, we've been manipulated by bad science and people with agendas that had very little to do with the environment and had a great deal to do with power and control. Fortunately, the truth is beginning to be told, and that gives all of us a better future. It's always an honor to be with you. I'm Alan Jackson, and you have a wonderful evening.